Hi guys! So last week I let you guys know that I'm going to be dedicating my Wednesday videos to writing topics. If any of you guys have your own writing dedicated channels or videos or blogs or anything like that, feel free to let me know in the comment section down below so that I can try to make a list of resources for other people to check out besides just my videos. Anyway, jumping right into today's video, which is a topic that I'm very excited about because I think it can make a huge difference in your writing, and that would be dialogue. A lot of the time, it's not even what takes place within the quotations that is an issue, but the stuff that takes place out of the quotations that is an issue, one of which would be the dialogue tags. The first tip would be that said in a dialogue tag is almost always the best. For the most part, said is considered an invisible word, just like and a and the. It's not something that people really take in and have to interpret. They read it and it gets the job done. But if you excessively use colorful dialogue tags, it can start to sound super cheesy. There are, of course, exceptions to this, and sometimes it's supposed to be part of the writing style and it's purposeful to include colorful writing tags. Usually this is found in a writing style where the narrator feels like they're cluing you in on an inside joke and making fun of the person who said something, or sometimes it's done in fairy tale type retellings where it feels like you're being told a story in a very whimsical way. The second tip that I have is that you don't even always need dialogue tags. This is especially true if you've already done a really good job establishing who is talking and what they're talking about, or if you've established a really good tone of voice for that specific character. And let's say in this scene, that character is talking to another character and there's only two of them. If you've already set up who's talking when, at some points, you're not gonna need a he said, she said after what they say. Tip number 3 is that you can sometimes use actions to designate who is talking. By this, I do not mean that you should replace dialogue tags exactly with an action word, because actions aren't the same as saying things. What I mean is that you can show what the character is doing physically with their body or with their facial expressions before or after the dialogue, and that can serve as a dialogue tag all on its own. An example of this would be Susie shrugged. I guess so. You don't need to say Susie shrugged. I guess so, she said, because we've already established that it's Susie that's going to be saying something. The fourth tip would be to mix up when what you're using as a dialogue tag either precedes or follows the dialogue itself. You don't always need your forms of dialogue tags to come after. Sometimes putting things before does a better job of establishing who is talking. Plus, it allows you to show how they're feeling about what they're about to say, or how they just took in what the other person just said. Be careful though that you don't overdo this, because too many things right before start to make it feel kind of like you're reading a script for a movie, so just make sure you mix it up and you have a good balance. The last dialogue tip that pertains just to dialogue tags themselves would be to avoid late dialogue tags. The whole point of a dialogue tag is to let the reader know who is talking, and if you wait way too long, you've kind of negated the point of having a dialogue tag. So I'm gonna give an example. If somebody says, I don't know if that's such a good idea. I mean, I would like to do it, but I just don't know. I don't even know if my mom would be okay with it, she said. That sounds ridiculous. You don't have to wait till the very end of the dialogue. You could wait until the end of the first sentence or the end of the first clause. Now getting into dialogue tips that have to actually do with the dialogue itself, and the first tip would be don't overuse names. This is actually somewhat true of dialogue tags as well. If you've established who is talking, the he said, she said just does fine. You don't need to constantly say Susie said, Joe said, Susie said, Joe said. But it's also true of actual dialogue. People do not constantly say each other's names. It's just you use each other's names when you're trying to get somebody's attention, or you get like middle named when your parents are upset with you. There are more instances than just those that people use each other's names, but overall, people do not constantly say each other's names when they're talking. The second tip for actual dialogue would be to use contractions. Whether or not you use contractions in the narrative is completely up to you. That's a separate thing. But contractions in the dialogue are just gonna make the dialogue flow so much better, and it's more realistic to how people actually talk. Tip number 3 is to have multiple points of interest within the conversation. What I mean by this is most of the time when people are talking to each other, they get sidetracked by whatever they're doing or whatever they're looking for, and sometimes they will say something that pertains to the main topic of the conversation along with something that's distracting them. For example, let's say that a couple is having a conversation and the husband says, "You'll never guess who got fired at work today." And then the wife says, "Who? By the way, did you remember to pick up more juice?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's in the back. And it was Rob." This can be extremely difficult to pull off, but generally people are doing things while they're talking to each other. Most people don't just like stand at full attention. So you want to try and incorporate whatever is currently on their mind or distracting them into the conversation along with the main points of the conversation. Tip number 4 is to not overuse capitalization, exclamation points, and ellipses. I think ellipses is one that it's a give or take. You can use it in a way where it very much shows that the character kind of trails off or they're pausing and they're talking, but if you do it too often, it loses its effect and the reader's kind of just gonna skip over it. As far as exclamation points, if a person's always got an exclamation point after what they're saying, it's too much. People aren't going around shouting all the time unless there's a situation that's super intense. And then of course, some authors won't use all capitals in their dialogue whatsoever, but if you do, make sure you don't use it too often. That should be reserved for when somebody is their angriest or happiest or most surprised or the most extreme of their emotions. Tip number 5, and this one comes up the most often I would say in fantasy or science fiction, and that would be avoid the phrase "as you know." Anytime a character starts the sentence with "as you know" or "as you may know" and then whatever they want to say, that immediately is like, oh, hey reader, this is something you should know. It kind of comes across lazy and it feels like the author couldn't find a way to organically portray the information, and most of the time you could literally just take the "as you know" or "as you may know" part of the sentence out and then just have them say whatever important thing they're about to say, and that gets the job done just fine. Now I have a few more tips that have to do with dialogue, but they're not necessarily dialogue tags or the dialogue itself, but I think that they're really important in how you treat your dialogue. The first of these would be to use dialogue as a means of character discovery. You will hear all the time in writing to show, don't tell, and often one of the hardest ways to do this is when you want your reader to know things about your character, but you don't want to just tell them. Now, if you're writing in first person, it's a little bit different because the narrator is literally telling you a story already, so it's a little bit different if that character tells you something about themselves or about some other character. But in third person, you want to more often than not sneak in hints about the characters and their pasts in the narrative, and then often you can use the dialogue as a means to actually finally reveal what that thing is you've been hinting at. The second of these tips would be to use the narrative to reinforce what was just said in the dialogue. Dialogue is often the perfect opportunity for people to show what's going on with the characters, how the world works, how magic systems work, that kind of thing. But sometimes the characters are going to be saying other things as well, or the characters are already familiar with what they're talking about, so it makes it kind of difficult for the reader to pick up on it. What you can do then is, after you've established what the character has said, then in the narrative you can reflect on what that character just said. So maybe the character is thinking about it, maybe they're questioning it, that kind of thing. And lastly, I would highly recommend that you read the dialogue aloud. If possible, try and even have a friend or a family member read the dialogue for you, because you already know what your character is saying, but if somebody has to read it, they're gonna stumble across anything that's clunky that you wouldn't have noticed yourself. Anyway, that's it for my tips to write dialogue. Even though I included a ton of tips, if you guys have other tips that you find super helpful for your dialogue, feel free to leave those in the comment section down below. If you have any suggestions for other writing videos that you would like to see, let me know that also. I know that you guys mentioned you wanted to see a part 2 to the magic video I did last week, and I'm so excited because I will be doing that, but I just have a few other things that I wanted to maybe do first, but let me know and I will for sure try to get around to doing it. If you guys liked the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Click the little bell icon so you get notified when I post new videos, and check out some of my videos right over here. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys later. Bye.